The pressure gauge climbed as we descended into the trench, passing depths where most vessels would have already imploded. I adjusted our ballast to keep us level against the rising water pressure. The Magellan's hull creaked around us, the familiar sounds of a working vessel under strain. "Passing 4,000 meters," I said, my voice echoing in the control room. "Hull integrity at 96%. Captain Sully grunted from his command chair, his weathered fingers drumming against the armrest. The sound had become a constant companion during our descent. "I don't like it, Rostova. Something about this recovery feels off." I fought the urge to roll my eyes. This was typical Sully. 30 years at sea had left him with more superstitions than practical knowledge. The sonar readings match the company's specs exactly. The Helios is right where it should be. "That's precisely what bothers me," he muttered, tugging at his salt and pepper beard. "A 7-person research vessel doesn't just stop communicating and sink itself neatly to the bottom of one of the deepest trenches in the Pacific." "Actually, Captain," Dr. Thorne piped up from his monitoring station, his glasses reflecting the blue glow of his screens, "there are several documented cases of submersibles experiencing catastrophic system failures that resulted in—" "Spare me the lecture, Doctor," Sully cut him off. "I've been pulling things from the deep since before you finished your first textbook. I focused on the controls, tuning out their bickering. The Magellan was a salvage vessel, built to dive deeper than anything else and retrieve what others couldn't. With a $5 million recovery bonus for the Helios, I couldn't let Sully's gut feelings or Thorne's enthusiasm distract me from our job. 5,000 meters, I reported, adjusting the external floodlights to penetrate the absolute darkness outside our viewport. Dropping speed to 12 meters per minute, we're entering the zone." Thorne practically pressed his nose against the reinforced glass of the observation window, fogging it with his excited breathing. "Do you realize we're currently deeper than Mount Everest is tall? Less than a dozen manned vessels have ever reached these depths. And half of those never came back up," Sully added grimly. I checked the environmental systems. The cabin temperature had dropped 2 degrees despite the heaters running at full power. That was expected. Heat vanished quickly at these depths, taken by the cold ocean pressing in from all sides. "The company's paying us to recover their investment, not to break records," I reminded them. Each dive tested the technology I helped design: the reinforced hull, pressure systems, and ballast tanks. The Magellan was partly my creation, and pushing its limits satisfied my professional pride. "How much longer until we reach the coordinates?" Thorne asked, his excitement making him sound younger than his 41 years. 28 minutes at current descent rate," I answered, "though I'd appreciate you not breathing all over my viewport, Doctor." He backed away with an apologetic smile and returned to his station, where he continued monitoring the water composition and temperature readings with childlike fascination. I'd worked with scientists before. They were always the same, treating every dive like a voyage of discovery rather than what it really was: a calculated risk with a paycheck at the end. The lights flickered momentarily as we passed through a thermal layer, causing Sully to mutter something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like a prayer. "Just a power fluctuation," I explained before he could voice his concerns. The temperature differential created a minor surge in the electrical systems. Completely normal. "Nothing's normal at these depths, Kay," he said, using my nickname for the first time since we'd started our descent. "The pressure out there is enough to crush a human body to the size of a coffee can in less than a second. Which is why we're inside a vessel designed to withstand pressures 3 times what we're currently experiencing," I countered. "The Magellan's hull is a titanium carbon composite that—" "Metal and mathematics don't account for everything in the deep," he interrupted, his voice dropping lower. "You ever wonder why sailors have so many superstitions, Rostova? It's because we've seen things science can't explain. Thorn looked up from his readings, interested despite himself. What kind of things, Captain? I shot Thorn a warning look. Getting Sully started on his sea stories would eat up valuable time, and we were on a strict timeline. 6,000 meters, I announced loudly, cutting off whatever tales Sully was about to spin. Beginning final approach sequence. Activating additional floodlights. The cabin filled with the sound of the light array activating. 8 beams pierced the darkness outside, revealing a cloud of dust swirling behind us. The Helios should be directly ahead, approximately 400 meters from our current position, I said, checking the sonar display. Reducing descent to 8 meters per minute and increasing forward propulsion. Corporate wants us to recover the black box first, Thorn reminded us, tapping through the mission parameters on his tablet. Then secure the vessel for towing if possible. Sully scoffed. They always want the data before the crew. Typical. The data might tell us what happened to the crew, I pointed out, though I silently agreed with his assessment. Our employers at Ocean Tech had made it clear that the research and equipment aboard the Helios were worth significantly more than any search and rescue operation. Not that rescue was likely after 2 weeks of silence. Reading a large object directly ahead, I reported, adjusting our approach vector. Size and shape consistent with the Helios specifications. All 3 of us leaned forward as our lights began to illuminate the seafloor. The terrain was alien, a mixture of volcanic rock and sediment that had never seen sunlight, undisturbed by human presence until now. There, Thorn whispered, pointing through the viewport. The beam of our strongest floodlight caught something reflective in the darkness, the smooth curve of a hull gleaming white against the black backdrop of the ocean floor. As we drew closer, the full shape of the Helios came into view. I froze, my hand hovering over the controls. The submersible sat on the ocean floor. Its white hull showed no signs of damage from the failure that should have caused it to sink. Most surprising, its external lights were still on, casting a glow around the abandoned vessel in the dark water. "That's impossible," I murmured, checking and rechecking our instruments. There's no way those systems should still be functioning after 2 weeks at this depth. Sully's face had gone pale in the blue light of the control room. "What did I tell you? This isn't right." For once, I couldn't argue with him. By every law of physics and engineering I knew, the site before us shouldn't exist. A perfectly intact submersible, fully powered, sitting abandoned in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The Helios, Thorn breathed, his scientific curiosity apparently overriding any sense of unease. We found it. The Helios sat on the ocean floor, illuminated by our floodlights. I stared at its intact hull, struggling to accept what I was seeing. At this depth, the vessel should have been crushed, its remains scattered across the seafloor. "This is impossible," I said, adjusting our position slightly to get a better view. "Look at the exterior lighting. It's still powered. After 2 weeks down here, its batteries should be dead." Thorn pressed his face closer to the viewport, his glasses reflecting the glow of our instrument panels. The company said it suffered a complete systems failure before losing contact. "Well, the company was wrong," I replied, running a quick diagnostic on our own systems. "Our readings show active electrical signatures. Whatever happened, it wasn't a power failure." Sully stood behind us, his weathered face tightening into a grimace. "I've seen ships go down in my time. None of them looked like this afterward." I maneuvered the Magellan around the Helios, completing a full circuit. The submersible's sleek form remained unblemished. No visible hull breaches, no impact damage, Nothing to explain why a state-of-the-art vessel would suddenly drop to the bottom of this trench. "Where's the crew?" Thorne asked, voicing the question forming in all our minds. "Helios carried a team of 7, right?" I nodded, checking the manifest on my tablet. 2 pilots, 4 researchers, and a company observer. No signs of evacuation pods being deployed. "They can't just vanish," Thorne said, his earlier excitement giving way to confusion. "No, they can't," I agreed, already preparing the remote operation vehicle. "We need that black box. It's the only way we'll know what happened here." The ROV bay was on the lower deck of the Magellan. I started the deployment sequence and watched as our underwater drone emerged from its housing. About the size of a suitcase with several articulated arms, the ROV was built for salvage operations like this one. "Bringing ROV online," I announced, taking control of the drone through the tactile interface. The small machine hummed to life, its own lights adding to our illumination of the Helios. "I'll position it near the access port for the data systems. Should be on the starboard side near the engine housing." As I guided the ROV toward the Helios, Thorne made a small noise of surprise. "Wait, what's that on the hull?" he asked, pointing to what appeared to be discolored patches on the Helios's exterior. "Can you get the ROV closer to that section?" I adjusted the ROV's path, bringing it alongside the strange markings Thorne had spotted. Through the high-definition camera feed, we could see unusual patterns spreading across the metal surface. Not quite rust or corrosion, but something else entirely. "I've never seen anything like this," Thorne said, his fingers flying across his tablet as he captured images. "It almost looks organic, but that's not possible. Nothing could grow at this depth, especially not in just 2 weeks." The discoloration appeared as branching patterns, like dark veins spreading across the Helios's hull. They didn't seem to compromise the structural integrity, but they followed no pattern I recognized from any normal undersea degradation process. "Could be some kind of chemical reaction with the hull material," I suggested, though I didn't believe it myself. "Let's focus on the black box first. We can study these markings later." I redirected the ROV to the data port access panel and extended its mechanical arm. The tool attachment spun precisely, removing the bolts from the protective cover with practiced ease. Inside, the black box, actually a bright orange data module designed to survive extreme conditions, remained securely mounted. Just as I was about to extract it, the lights on the Magellan flickered. Not dramatically, but enough that we all noticed. The control room dimmed momentarily before returning to normal illumination. "What was that?" Thorne asked, looking up from his documentation. I checked our power systems quickly. "Just a small fluctuation, probably the depth affecting our systems." Sully made a sound that might have been a humorless laugh. "That's what they always say at first." I ignored him, focusing on carefully extracting the black box with the ROV's manipulator arm. The module disengaged from its housing with a satisfying click that transmitted through our audio sensors. "Got it," I said, beginning the retrieval process. As the ROV made its way back to the Magellan with its precious cargo, Sully cleared his throat. "In 40 years at sea, I've seen my share of wrecks," he said. "Most have simple explanations: storms, equipment failure, human error. But some, the ones old sailors call cursed." Thorne looked up from his tablet with interest. "What do you mean by cursed?" Sully leaned against the bulkhead, his eyes fixed on the Helios outside our viewport. Ships found adrift with crews missing. No signs of struggle, food still warm on plates, logs reporting clear skies before going silent. The Mary Celeste is the famous one, but there are dozens more the public never hears about. I guided the ROV back into its bay, securing the black box. Those all happened on the surface, Sully. Different circumstances entirely. The Scorpion submarine, 1968, Sully said, ignoring my comment. The Navy said it was a mechanical failure, but I knew guys who worked the recovery. They said parts of that sub looked untouched, like it had been taken apart instead of blown up. And the crew? The crew of the Scorpion died in a tragic accident caused by a torpedo malfunction, I interrupted. Retrieve. The crew of the Scorpion died in a tragic accident caused by a torpedo malfunction, I interrupted, retrieving the black box from the ROV bay and carrying it back to the main control room. Everything else is just sailors spinning tales. Sully's eyes narrowed. Is that what you think happened here? A tragic accident that left a vessel completely intact with 7 people gone without a trace. I set the black box on the workstation and began connecting the necessary cables to interface with our systems. I think there's a rational explanation we'll find in this data. The lights flickered again, slightly longer this time. I glanced at our power readouts, noting a 2% drop before the system stabilized. Thorne remained fixated on his tablet, scrolling through the images he'd captured. These patterns on the hull, they're spreading in real time. Look at these comparative shots taken just 8 minutes apart. He held up the screen, showing 2 images side by side. The strange, veiny discolorations had indeed expanded, creeping across the Helios's hull like frost on a window. That's not physically possible, I said, pausing my work with the black box. Nothing grows that fast, especially not at these depths and pressures. Tell that to whatever's on that ship, Sully muttered, moving closer to the viewport. You ever heard of the USS Cyclops? Massive naval vessel. Vanished in 1918 with 300 men aboard. No distress call, no debris, nothing. Thorne looked up. Bermuda Triangle, right? That's just a myth. Except they found pieces of it in 2006 off the coast of North Carolina, Sully replied. Navy kept it quiet. Friend of mine on the salvage team said they found handprints burned into the metal from the inside out, like the men were trying to claw their way through solid steel. I rolled my eyes. And I suppose your friend conveniently can't verify this story. He killed himself 3 weeks after the recovery operation, Sully said flatly. Left a note saying he kept seeing faces in the dark. The control room fell silent except for the hum of our equipment. Despite myself, I felt a chill run through me. I turned back to the black box connection, focusing on the task at hand. There was a research vessel in the South Pacific in 1981. Sully continued after a moment. The Kronos. Similar mission to this one. Deep sea exploration. They found something on the ocean floor that their instruments couldn't identify. Next transmission was just screaming. When they recovered the ship 2 months later, it was completely empty. Food uneaten, bunk still made, not so much as a drop of blood, but every mirror on the ship was broken. That's enough, Sully, I said, my hands working quickly to establish the connection between the black box and our systems. The company knows more than they're telling us, he pressed on. Why do you think the recovery bonus is so high? Because nobody came back from the first attempt. There wasn't a first attempt, Thorne said, looking confused. Sully gave a grim smile. Check the fine print in your contract, Doc. I connected the last cable to the black box. Our systems recognized it right away, which meant the data was intact. Both of you need to calm down. We're scientists, not characters in a ghost story. The main screen lit up as the interface connected, showing the Helios logo followed by a data transfer initialization sequence. Whatever happened to the Helios crew, we'll find out soon enough, I said, typing in the command codes to begin the data extraction. The black box records everything. system data, cabin audio, video feeds. If there was a hull breach, equipment failure, or any other emergency, it'll be logged. The screen showed the data transfer beginning, a standard progress bar estimating completion in 46 minutes. As the first packets of information moved from the black box to our systems, the Magellan's lights dimmed again, longer this time. Nearly 5 seconds of darkness before they returned. That's the third time, Thorne noted, glancing nervously at the ceiling. Maybe we should run a diagnostic on our power systems. Already did, I replied, checking the readouts again. Everything's nominal. Probably just power spikes from interfacing with the Helios data. Sully walked to the viewport and looked at the abandoned vessel. You ever wonder why black boxes are actually orange? He asked casually. High visibility for recovery operations, I answered automatically. That's what they tell us, Sully said. But I knew an engineer who worked on the first designs in the 60s. He said they were supposed to be white, but during tests, they came back discolored, like they'd absorbed something during recording. That's ridiculous, I said, though I found myself looking at the orange box now connected to our systems. Is it? Sully asked quietly, pointing through the viewport. Look. Outside, one of the exterior floodlights on the Magellan blinked, then went out completely. Through the viewport, I could see the darkness expanding where the light had been, as if the blackness of the deep ocean was slowly creeping toward us. Just a bulb failure, I said, trying to sound confident. We have backups. The data transfer from the black box reached 5% complete, numbers and code scrolling across our screens. I noticed something odd in the file structure. Unusually large audio files marked with timestamps from after the Helios supposedly lost all contact. That can't be right, I murmured, selecting one of the files. What is it? Thorne asked, looking over my shoulder. Audio recordings from 3 days after the Helios went silent, I said. The system shouldn't have been functioning at all by then. My finger hovered over the playback button. Part of me, the rational, scientific part, knew that listening to these recordings was the entire point of our mission. But another part, a primitive instinct I rarely acknowledged, was screaming at me to disconnect the black box immediately. I pressed play. The speakers came to life with static, followed by silence. Then, faintly, what sounded like breathing. Slow, measured breaths that didn't sound entirely human. A voice broke through, distorted and strained. It's in the lights. A pause. God help us. It's in the lights. More static, then silence again. The data transfer continued, now at 8%. Sully had gone pale. Disconnect it, now. Don't be ridiculous, I said, though my heart was racing. This is exactly what we came for. Evidence of what happened. K. Thorne said softly, pointing to his tablet. The patterns on the Helios. They're moving toward us. I looked at his screen, then up through the viewport. The strange discolorations that had spread across the Helios were indeed advancing along the sea floor, creeping toward the Magellan in tendrils of absolute darkness that seemed to consume even the light from our floodlights. Another exterior light went out, then another. The data transfer reached 12%, and suddenly every screen on the Magellan displayed the same message. Thank you for the invitation. Disconnect it, Sully shouted, lunging for the cables. I reached for the connection port, but before my fingers touched it, every light in the control room went out simultaneously, plunging us into complete darkness except for the eerie glow of our screens. And in that moment of darkness, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. Darkness surrounded us as the screens blinked with the message, "Thank you for the invitation." My fingers raced over the control panel, looking for the system reset. The backup lights turned on after a few seconds, filling the control room with a dim, red glow. What the hell just happened? Sully's voice cut through the sudden quiet. Power surge, maybe. I wasn't convinced by my own words. The Magellan systems were designed with redundancies specifically to prevent total blackouts. Let's see what we actually got from that data transfer before everything went dark. Thorne had pressed himself against the viewport, his face uncomfortably close to the glass. The patterns on the hull, they've spread at least another 3 feet since we started the transfer. I pulled up the files we downloaded from the black box. The transfer had reached 12% before cutting out, but that was enough to access some of Helios's final recorded logs. We should leave. Sully moved closer, looking over my shoulder at the screen. Disconnect that thing and let's head back up. Something's not right here. We came all this way, I said, organizing the recovered files by date. Don't you want to know what happened to them? The audio logs were in chronological order. Most were daily reports, system checks, research updates, crew rotations. But in the final week, the logs became shorter and more fragmented, with unexplained gaps between recordings. Look at this. I pointed to the screen. The last 3 days, the time between logs gets longer, and this final one was recorded 2 days after they supposedly lost contact with the surface. Thorne abandoned his post by the viewport and joined us, adjusting his glasses. Play it. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the control. The image of that message was still fresh in my mind. We need to know, Thorne said, leaning in. Whatever happened to them could happen to us if we don't understand it. I selected the earliest log from the final week and pressed play. Captain Lin Wei's voice filled our cabin, steady but tired. Helios log, day 17. We've reached the targeted depth and deployed sensors as planned. Dr. Yamamoto reports unusual readings from the trench wall. Some kind of energy signature that doesn't match our charts. We're extending our stay by 48 hours to investigate. All systems functioning normally. End log. Nothing unusual there, Sully muttered. I moved to the next recording. This time, Wei's voice had a different quality, tighter, more controlled. Helios log, day 18. 2 crew members reported seeing movements outside the viewports last night. Nothing showed on our external cameras. Dr. Yamamoto believes it might be bioluminescent organisms we haven't cataloged yet. Sanchez disagrees, says the movements were too organized, too deliberate for sea life. I've ordered continuous external monitoring. End log. The overhead lights in our cabin flickered slightly. I looked up, watching them stabilize. Check the power systems, Sully ordered, his expression hardening. I ran a quick diagnostic. Output normal. No fluctuations registered. Thorne frowned. But we all saw that. I played the next log. Wei's voice had taken on a strained quality. Helios log, day 19. The external lights on the port side keep malfunctioning. Reyes thinks it's pressure damage, but the integrity readings are fine. The darkness seems to gather around the lights. Yamamoto says I'm being paranoid, but I know what I saw. Something moved toward the light. Sanchez agrees with me. We're keeping the internal lights at maximum brightness now. End log. The main lights above us dimmed again, longer this time. 3 or 4 seconds of noticeably reduced illumination before returning to normal. My stomach tightened. I didn't imagine that, Thorne said, eyes darting to the ceiling. I checked the systems again. Power output steady, no drops registered. Sully leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. Systems can lie. I played the next log, dated 2 days later. When Wei's voice came through, it was almost unrecognizable. Quick, hushed. paranoid. Day 21. Something's wrong with Reyes and Yamamoto. They keep turning off lights, claiming they need to save power, but we're at normal levels. They stare at the viewports for hours. When they think no one is watching, they talk to the darkness outside. I caught Reyes trying to open the outer hatch last night. He said he heard something calling him. We've confined them to their quarters. The shadows gather around our floodlights and consume the light. The darkness isn't empty. It's hungry. My skin crawled as Wei's breathing grew more erratic. I don't trust half my crew anymore. They're not themselves. Their eyes are different. They look at the rest of us like we're food. Sanchez is the only one I still trust completely. We're sleeping in shifts. We've requested emergency extraction, but I don't know if our messages are getting through. Something's interfering with our communications. If anyone receives this... The recording cut off abruptly. Silence filled our cabin. My hand hovered over the console, not quite ready to play the next log. "There's one more," I said finally. "Recorded 2 days after they supposedly lost contact." "Play it," Thorne whispered. As I moved to tap the screen, the lights overhead went out completely. Not just dimmed, gone. In the same instant, all our console screens went dark. Total blackness surrounded us. The kind of darkness that exists only at the bottom of the ocean. Absolute and crushing. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Couldn't see Thorne or Sully. Just endless, perfect darkness. "Systems restart," I called out, trying to keep my voice level, as I blindly felt along the edge of my console for the manual override. Backup power should engage automatically. The darkness. Thorne's voice came from somewhere to my right, higher pitched than normal. "It's outside the viewport, moving. I can see it moving." "You can't see anything," Sully snapped. "It's pitch black in here." "That's my point." Thorne's voice trembled. "I shouldn't be able to see movement outside when there's no light, but I can." My fingers found the restart switch just as Thorne let out a strangled gasp. "It's pressed against the glass," he whispered. "Oh God, it's looking in." I slammed my palm against the override. Nothing happened. "Kay!" Sully's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Get those lights back on." "I'm trying," I said, feeling my way along the console. "Manual restart isn't responding." "It knows we're here." Thorne's voice had dropped to a horrified murmur. "It came when we connected to the black box. We invited it in." The seconds stretched into what felt like minutes as I worked blindly at the controls. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried another sequence, then another. Then the emergency systems kicked in. Red warning lights filled the cabin. The main console flickered back to life, screens rebooting one by one. I ran an immediate systems check. "Main power's offline. We're running on emergency backup. Life support and basic navigation are functional, but that's about it." Thorne stood frozen by the viewport, his face ghost white in the crimson emergency lighting. "I saw it," he insisted, not looking at either of us. "When the lights were out, I saw movement. Something flowing around the ship. Something aware." Sully moved to the main controls, his weathered face set in grim lines. "We're leaving. Now. Forget the salvage, forget the bonus. This mission is over." I hesitated, looking at the screen where the final log from the Helio still waited to be played. "There's one more recording. Maybe it explains what happened to them. What's happening to us." "Are you out of your mind?" Sully turned on me. "Did you not hear what their captain said? Did you not just experience what happened? Whatever took that crew is trying to take us too. We need to understand what we're dealing with," I argued. Running blind could be more dangerous than knowing. I agree with Kay, Thorne said, finally turning from the viewport. If we leave without understanding, we can't defend ourselves. And the company will just send another team down here to face the same thing unprepared. Sully's face hardened. I won't risk my ship or my crew on some academic curiosity. We're going up. That's an order. The three of us stood in the control room, debating. Outside the viewport, the Helios rested on the ocean floor, its lights still glowing. Above us, the emergency lights buzzed quietly. I looked from Sully to Thorne and back, weighing our options. Continue reviewing the logs and possibly understand what we faced, or retreat to the surface immediately and hope whatever was down here couldn't follow. The decision hung heavy in the darkness, as unavoidable as the ocean surrounding us. I accessed the files from the black box, while Sully paced behind me. His footsteps were heavy and deliberate, broadcasting his disapproval louder than words could. We should be starting ascent procedures, not digging deeper into that thing, he said, jabbing a finger at the console. His face looked redder than usual under the emergency lighting. I need to know what happened to them, I said, keeping my eyes on the screen. Whatever affected the Helios might already be affecting us. Better to understand it than run blind. Thorne stood at the viewport, his nose nearly pressed against the glass. He hadn't moved for at least 10 minutes. The patterns are growing, he mumbled, branching out like neurons. Step away from the glass, Sully barked. That's an order. Thorne didn't respond or move. His breathing had fogged a small circle on the viewport. I pulled up the video logs, arranged in order like the audio files. The earliest ones showed crew members at their stations, taking scientific readings and sharing meals in the galley. Everything looked normal. Here, I said, pointing to the screen. This is where things start changing. The video showed Captain Wei arguing with two researchers. Their gestures were agitated, faces tight with strain. The timestamp indicated it was day 18 of their mission, matching the audio log we'd heard earlier. Turn it off, Sully said. I ignored him. The next video showed a woman, Dr. Yamamoto, based on her uniform, sitting alone in what looked like sleeping quarters. She kept glancing over her shoulder at something off camera, her lips moving in whispers too quiet for the mic to pick up. Look at her eyes, Thorne said suddenly beside me. I jumped. I hadn't heard him move from the viewport. They're tracking something we can't see. I felt a chill travel up my back. When did you move over here? Thorne looked confused. I've been standing here watching with you. No, you were. I turned to the viewport, then back to Thorne. Had I lost track of time? My head felt foggy, like I'd skipped forward a few minutes without realizing it. Never mind. Sully grabbed the back of my chair. You see? It's already happening. We need to leave. Now. What's already happening? I asked, trying to focus. I just lost track of where Thorne was standing. The same thing that happened to them. Sully pointed at the screen. I advanced to the next video file. This one showed the Helios control room. Two crew members were shouting at each other while a third tried to separate them. The date stamp showed day 20, 3 days before they lost contact. He took it, shouted one of them, a stocky man with a maintenance uniform. I saw him. I didn't take anything, the other man yelled back. You're the one acting crazy. The fight escalated, with the maintenance worker throwing a punch. The third crew member was knocked aside. Blood splattered across the camera lens. Jesus, I whispered, pausing the video. This is what's coming for us, Sully said, his voice low and menacing. First you get confused, then paranoid, then violent. We don't know that, I said, but my conviction was wavering. I skipped to the final video file, dated 2 days after the Helios lost contact. The control room was dark, lit by emergency lights. Captain Wei sat at the console. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken. Blood stained his uniform. "They're all gone," he said to the camera. "Either dead or changed. It came in through the lights. It feeds on light. The darker it gets, the weaker it seems. But we need some light to function. It's patient. It waits until you forget. Until you make a mistake." Wei looked over his shoulder, then back to the camera. "I'm turning off life support. It's the only way to make sure it doesn't get out. If you're watching this, burn the wreck. Don't salvage anything. Just burn it all." The video ended abruptly. "We need to go," Sully said, his hand moving to the ascent controls. I grabbed his wrist. "Wait. Think about this. If Wei shut down life support, how is the Helios still powered up? How did that message get sent to us when we connected the black box? Something doesn't add up." "You're right," Thorne said, his voice unnaturally calm. "It doesn't add up because it's still there. It didn't die with them." Sully yanked his arm away from my grip. "I don't care about your theories or your curiosity. I'm getting us out of here." "No!" I shouted, standing up. "Not until we understand what we're dealing with. If this thing can follow us up—" "There is no thing," Sully roared, his face inches from mine. "There's just a crew that went crazy from isolation and pressure, and now you're going the same way." The lights flickered overhead, and both of us stopped. "I didn't check the power systems," I said quietly. Sully's brow furrowed. "What?" "Earlier, when the lights dimmed. I said I checked the systems, but I don't remember actually doing it." I looked at my hands, trying to recall the sequence of events. "I've been sitting here the whole time." Thorne walked back to the viewport, drawn to it like a moth to flame. "It's happening," Sully said, backing away from me. "It's happening to you already." I shook my head, trying to clear it. "No, I'm fine. Just tired. Stressed." But a seed of doubt had been planted. Had I experienced a blackout? A memory gap? I turned back to the console and pulled up our system diagnostics. The power output was steady, but there was an anomalous reading from the external array. One of our floodlights, the port side forward light, was drawing power, but showing decreased luminosity output. "That doesn't make sense," I murmured. "Kay," Thorne called, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Kay, you need to see this." I joined him at the viewport. Outside, the beam of our port side floodlight extended into the darkness, illuminating particles in the water and the rocky seafloor. But something was wrong with how the light behaved. "The shadows," Thorne whispered. "They're not right." At first, I couldn't see what he meant. Then it hit me. The rocks and debris on the seafloor weren't casting shadows away from the light source. Instead, the shadows seemed to curl inward, toward the light. As I watched, the illuminated area grew slightly smaller. "It's not being blocked," Thorne said, tapping against the glass. "It's being consumed. The darkness is eating the light." I stared, unable to process what I was seeing. Physics didn't work that way. Light dispelled darkness, not the other way around. But there was no denying the evidence before my eyes. The beam of light was indeed shrinking, and the darkness around it seemed to move with purpose, flowing like liquid into the illuminated area. "It's happening," Thorne said, his voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "Just like on the Helios. It found us through the black box. It's here." I kept checking the readout on the floodlight, hoping I'd made a mistake. But the power consumption was clear. It was only 75% bright while using 115% of normal power. Something was consuming the light. "Thorn, get away from the viewport," I said, but he seemed transfixed by what he was seeing outside. "It's moving," he whispered. "The shadows aren't behaving naturally. They're curling toward the light source instead of away from it." Sully grabbed Thorn's arm and pulled him back. "We're leaving. Now." "We can't." The words came out before I could stop them. "The external floodlight needs to be examined before we attempt ascent. If something's interfering with our systems." "Are you suggesting we go outside?" Sully's voice rose an octave. "After everything we just saw in those logs?" I pulled up the maintenance protocols on my console. The armored dive suit could work for a quick examination. 20 minutes max. Just enough time to check the floodlight and get back in. "Absolutely not." Sully's face had gone pale. "I'll do it." Thorn's voice was quiet but determined. When we both turned to look at him, he added, "I'm the science officer. This is exactly the kind of anomaly I'm supposed to investigate. This isn't some science experiment," Sully growled. "Did you not watch the same footage I did? The Helios crew went mad because they didn't understand what was happening," Thorn finished. "I have a better chance of figuring this out than anyone." He looked at me. "How quickly can you prep the airlock?" My hands were already moving across the console. 15 minutes. Sully looked between us, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You're both making a mistake." "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But we need to know what we're dealing with if we want any chance of making it to the surface." 17 minutes later, Thorn stood in the airlock wearing the Magellan's armored dive suit. The suit wasn't designed for deep-sea exploration, just emergency repairs, but it would keep him alive for 30 minutes at this depth. "Helmet cam active," I confirmed as his video feed appeared on my main screen. The image showed his point of view from inside the helmet. "Oxygen at 100%. You'll have 25 minutes before you need to start heading back in." "Copy that." His voice came through slightly distorted over the comm system. Sully stood behind me, arms crossed. He hadn't tried to stop us again, but his disapproval filled the room. "Remember," I said, "you're only checking the port side floodlight. Don't go near the Helios no matter what you see." "Understood." Thorn's breathing was measured but quick. I started the airlock sequence. Depressurizing now. Water gradually filled the chamber as the pressure equalized. I watched Thorn's vitals on a secondary screen. Heart rate elevated but within normal parameters for someone about to step into crushing depths. "Airlock outer door opening," I announced as the heavy metal door slid aside. Through Thorn's helmet cam, I saw the dark ocean beyond, illuminated only by the Magellan's remaining external lights. Thorn took a cautious step out. The suit's thrusters engaged, helping him maneuver in the intense pressure. I'm outside, moving toward the port side now. I watched his progress through multiple camera feeds, the helmet cam showing his perspective, and the Magellan's external cameras tracking his movement along the hull. "I can see the floodlight," Thorn reported. "It's strange." The helmet cam focused on the large external light. It was clearly powered, but the illumination it cast seemed to stop unnaturally short, as if the light was being swallowed by the surrounding darkness. "Are you getting this?" Thorn asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "The light isn't propagating normally. Can you check for physical damage?" Thorn moved closer, his gloved hand reaching toward the housing of the floodlight. No visible damage to the exterior casing. He tapped a small device against the light. "Running diagnostic now." His breathing had quickened slightly. On the vitals monitor, I noticed his heart rate climbing. "Diagnostic shows no mechanical failure," he reported. "Power is flowing correctly, but wait." The helmet cam shifted as Thorn looked up and around. "Something's moving out here." "What do you mean?" Sully leaned forward, suddenly alert. I don't know how to describe it." Thorn's voice had taken on an edge. "It's like the darkness is thicker in some places than others, moving independently of the currents." I checked the external cameras, but couldn't see what he was referring to. "Can you be more specific?" Oh God." Thorn's breathing became ragged. "It's coming toward me." Through the helmet cam, I saw nothing unusual, just the illuminated section of the hull and the darkness beyond. But Thorn was turning quickly, looking in all directions. "Thorn, what's happening?" I demanded. "My wrist light just went out," he gasped. "It was fine, and then it's like something swallowed it." I checked his suit diagnostics. "Your wrist light is still drawing power. It should be functional." "Well, it's not." His voice cracked. There it is again." The helmet cam swung wildly as Thorn spun around. For a split second, I thought I saw something, a deeper darkness moving against the black of the ocean. "Come back in," Sully ordered. "Now." "I can't." Thorn's secondary light flickered and died. "It's taking the lights, one by one." I started the airlock retrieval sequence. "Thorn, use your thrusters. Head straight back to the airlock." "I'm trying." His breathing was coming in gasps now. "But I can't see where— Wait, what is that?" The helmet cam showed something impossible. Darkness flowing like liquid, coalescing into a form that seemed to absorb all light that touched it. The edges of this darkness weren't sharp. They seemed to blur and pulse, reaching out like tendrils. "Oh God, it's on the suit," Thorn screamed. The helmet cam showed darkness creeping across the arm of his dive suit. "It's coming through." "That's impossible," I whispered, but I was watching it happen. The darkness seemed to be seeping through the material of the suit, defying all physical laws. Thorn's vitals spiked, heart rate climbing dangerously high. "It's cold. It's so cold." His voice had risen to a pitch I'd never heard from him before. "It's inside. It's—" The helmet cam view tilted sideways as Thorn spun out of control. For a moment, I caught sight of the Magellan through his camera, its light seeming small and insignificant against the vast darkness. Then Thorn screamed, a primal sound of pure terror that made my skin crawl. "Thorn!" I shouted into the comm. "Thorn, respond!" His vitals continued to spike erratically. The helmet cam showed only darkness now, as if all the lights had been extinguished. His screaming continued for 3 more seconds, then abruptly cut off. The comm went silent. Thorn's vital signs flatlined simultaneously. "No," I breathed, frantically checking the systems. "No, that's not—" Sully pulled me away from the console. "The airlock. Seal it. Now." I moved on autopilot, initiating the emergency protocol to close and lock the outer airlock door. The systems responded sluggishly. "Warning. Airlock malfunction," the automated voice announced. "Outer door closing failure." "Override," I commanded, entering my emergency codes. "Priority shut down." The console flickered. For a moment, all the screens went black. When they came back online, the external camera feeds were gone. "Systems failure in sectors 3, 4, and 7. The automated voice continued. "Power fluctuations detected in life support." Sully's face had gone completely white. "It's inside." "That's not possible," I insisted, even as more warning lights began flashing across my console. "The airlock. Look." Sully pointed to one of the remaining camera feeds. The inner airlock door, the one that separated the chamber from the main body of the Magellan, was showing hairline fractures around its seal. As we watched, the metal seemed to frost over, tiny crystals of ice forming along the edges. "It's testing our defenses," I whispered. Another system alert blared. "Warning, communication systems failing, backup power rerouting." I stared at the rapidly degrading displays, my mind racing to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't a mechanical failure or a biological contamination. This was something else entirely. "It's consuming the systems," I realized aloud. Just like it consumed the light outside. Just like it consumed... I couldn't bring myself to say Thorne's name. "We need to get to the escape pod," Sully said, his voice unnaturally calm. "Right now." I shook my head, still working the console, trying to reroute power to the critical systems. "It's blocking access to sections 5 through 8. The escape pod is in section 8. So we're trapped." The main lights flickered and dimmed. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the control room in a dull red glow. "Warning. Power consumption exceeding output by 20%. Source of consumption unknown." I looked up at Sully. "It's feeding. On our energy. On our light." A terrible understanding was beginning to take shape in my mind. That's what it did to the Helios. That's why the ship is still powered. It's being kept alive as a lure. "A lure for what?" Sully asked, though I think he already knew the answer. "For us." My hands were shaking as I pulled up the black box files again. For anyone who would come looking, anyone who would connect to their systems and play back their records. The screens flickered as more systems failed. In the red light, I saw frost forming on the viewport, spreading inward from the edges. "It needs a host," I said. "A vessel. That's why the Helios crew went mad. This phage was inside them, changing them, turning them against each other." Sully backed away from me, eyes wide. "And now it's here. With us." I stared at the black box still connected to our systems, the horror of what we'd done finally sinking in. "We invited it in," I whispered. "By playing those recordings, we gave it exactly what it wanted. A new ship, a new crew." Another light failed overhead, plunging half the control room into shadow. In the darkness, I could almost imagine something moving. Something patient and ancient that had been waiting a very long time for another chance to feed. Thorne's scream still echoed in my ears even after his vitals flatlined on the monitor. The emergency klaxons blared around us, red lights flashing as I frantically tried to override the airlock systems. "We need to seal it now," Sully shouted, his face ashen in the emergency lighting. "Whatever got him is trying to get in." I saw it then. Frost forming along the edges of the inner airlock door, spreading like crystalline fingers reaching into our safe haven. The metal groaned as if under immense pressure, but not from the outside, crushing inward. This looked like something was pushing from the other side. "The outer door won't respond," I said, my fingers flying across the emergency protocols. "Something's interfering with the signal." A bang echoed through the hull as the outer door finally slammed shut, but too late. Whatever had taken Thorne was already in the airlock chamber. The temperature reading in the small space plummeted to -20 degrees within seconds. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," I said, turning back to the black box data. "There has to be something in these logs. Are you insane?" Sully grabbed my shoulder. "We just lost Thorne. We need to start emergency ascent procedures now." I shrugged his hand away. "If we don't know what this thing is, we won't make it to the surface." The frost on the inner airlock door was spreading quickly. I pulled up the corrupted files from the Helios logs that we hadn't accessed before. There were dozens of them, partially damaged but possibly recoverable. "Kay, step away from that console," Sully said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I'm ordering you as captain of this vessel." I ignored him, focusing on the data recovery program. The final log entries might tell us how to fight this thing. Captain Wei knew something. He tried to warn us. Sully backed away slowly, his eyes never leaving me. "You've been exposed to it. Through the black box. It's affecting your judgment." I heard him retreat down the corridor toward the engine room, but I couldn't spare the time to go after him. The recovery program was working, piecing together fragments of corrupted video and audio logs. I glanced at the viewport where darkness swirled outside, somehow deeper than the natural darkness of the ocean depths. The patterns that had been spreading across the Helios were now visible on our own hull, creeping toward our external lights. One by one, the lights on our port side dimmed and went out. The first recovered file appeared on my screen, a research log from Dr. Yamamoto, dated 3 days after the Helios officially lost contact. Her face was gaunt, eyes wide with terror, but also a strange fascination. "It's not a biological entity in the conventional sense," she whispered, constantly glancing over her shoulder. "The organism, we've named it the phage, exists primarily as a non-corporeal energy pattern that manifests physically only when feeding." I leaned closer to the screen, trying to ignore the creeping cold that was spreading through the control room. Another external light went dark outside. Yamamoto continued. "The phage evolved in the ocean trenches, using psychic lures to hunt. It feeds on the bioelectrical patterns created by fear. The more afraid you are, the stronger it gets." The video glitched, skipping ahead. When it resumed, Yamamoto was closer to the camera, whispering urgently. "We believe the black box doesn't just record data. Its neural network actually captures and stores the specific bioelectric frequency of human consciousness. When we connected to the black box of the previous expedition, we inadvertently created a bridge for the phage to cross over to our vessel." My blood ran cold as I realized what we had done. We had provided the same bridge by connecting to their black box. Another set of lights went dark outside. I accessed more recovered files and found notes from the science team. They theorized the creature evolved in the darkness of deep-sea trenches, possibly millions of years ago. It could consume light and energy to create manifestations that affected physical matter. A crash echoed from somewhere deep in the ship, followed by the sound of metal scraping against metal. Over the internal comms, I heard Sully's voice, breathless and panicked. "I've secured the engine room," he said. "Stay away, Kay. I know you're compromised. I've seen how you've been staring at those screens just like Thorne before he went out there. Just like Yamamoto in those videos." "Sully, I'm trying to find a way to fight this thing," I responded, but he had already cut the connection. More external lights went dark. We were down to just 2 floodlights now, and the darkness seemed to be gathering around them, thickening like ink in water. I found one final video from Captain Wei, recorded just before his death. His face was barely visible in the darkness of the Helios control room, just his eyes catching what little light remained. "The phage hunts by creating darkness," he said calmly. "It consumes light, feeds on fear, and uses that energy to grow stronger. We tried fighting it by shutting down systems and working in the dark, but that only made it worse. It thrives in absence. The other ship that found us tried to help. They became its next meal." My eyes widened as I realized the implications. There had been another rescue attempt before us. The company hadn't told us. "Their mistake was trying to meet darkness with darkness," Wei said. "The phage just consumed their energy too. It's ancient, patient, and hungry." The video ended with Wei's haunted eyes staring into the camera. Outside our viewport, The second-to-last floodlight flickered and died. Just one light remained, and the darkness around it seemed almost solid now, pressing against the glass. I heard a faint tapping sound and turned to see hairline fractures forming on the viewport, microscopic at first, then spreading outward like a web. The ship's power levels were dropping steadily as something drained our energy reserves. At our current consumption rate, we had perhaps 2 hours of power left, not enough to reach the surface. I stared at the data scrolling across my screen, piecing together everything I'd learned. The phage consumed light and energy, growing stronger with each feeding. It used that strength to create more darkness, to spread further, to hunt more effectively. Fighting darkness with darkness wouldn't work. Shutting down systems would only make it stronger. The last external light flickered, struggling against the encroaching blackness. That's when it hit me. The solution so clear it was terrifying in its simplicity. We couldn't fight darkness with darkness. Our only chance was to create a light so powerful, so overwhelming, that the creature couldn't consume it all at once. We needed to overload it, like forcing someone to drink from a fire hose. The ship's reactor. If I could modify it to create a controlled overload, it might generate an underwater flashbang effect that would overwhelm the phage. But the reactor controls were in the engine room, with Sully. The last external light went out, leaving the Magellan in darkness, except for the emergency lights inside. I felt the pressure of the deep-sea predator against our hull, working to reach its prey. The fractures in the viewport spread across the acrylic barrier. With each second, they multiplied. My breaths quickened as I watched the darkness press against our only window to the outside. I knew what happened next. Complete structural failure. I grabbed the emergency kit from under the console and slung it over my shoulder. The phage would breach the hull soon, and I needed to be ready. My plan was to overload the reactor to create a massive energy discharge. A flashbang for an entity that fed on darkness. The corridors of the Magellan seemed narrower than usual as I moved away from the control room. I kept my wrist light pointed at the floor, providing just enough illumination to navigate without feeding our enemy more than necessary. The ship groaned under the immense pressure of the trench. Or maybe it was something else causing those sounds. "Sully," I spoke into my comm unit, keeping my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my throat. "I'm heading to you. We need to talk." No response, just static. I paused at a junction, weighing my options. The direct route led past the crew quarters and mess hall. The alternative was through maintenance and storage, longer, but possibly safer. The metal beneath my fingers felt cold. I chose the maintenance route. Fewer lights meant fewer places for the phage to gain strength. The darkness in the corridor ahead was almost total, but I resisted the urge to increase my light output. More light would just give it more to feed on. The phage evolved in deep-sea trenches, I whispered to myself, recalling Dr. Yamamoto's logs. It's adapted to hunt using minimal energy signatures. I moved carefully, touching the wall with my free hand to guide myself. Every few meters, I swept my wrist light in a quick arc, just enough to confirm my position before returning to darkness. The maintenance corridor was lined with pipes and junction boxes, creating odd shadows even in the minimal light. A soft tapping sound from somewhere ahead made me freeze. I held my breath, listening. The tapping continued, irregular and faint. It could be the hull adjusting to pressure. It could be something else. I dimmed my light further and pressed on. The air turned cold as I neared the engine room. My breath fogged in front of me. Ice lined the doorway, confirming my fears. The phage was here, feeding on the thermal energy. "Sully," I called out louder this time. "I'm outside the engine room. I'm coming in." Still no response. I placed my palm against the door's manual release and pushed. It swung open with surprising ease, revealing the dim interior of the engine room. The reactor hummed quietly at the center, its status lights showing minimal output, just enough to maintain life support and emergency systems. "Stay back." Sully's voice came from behind a bank of equipment. "I don't know what you are anymore." I took a careful step inside, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. "It's me, Sully. Just me. The way you were acting up there." His voice was tight with fear. "The way you kept staring at that data when Thorne was dying. That's not normal." "I was trying to understand what we're dealing with," I explained, taking another step forward. I could see him now, crouched behind the main reactor control station. He had a welding torch in his hand, its unlit nozzle pointed in my direction like a weapon. "The phage feeds on energy and fear, Sully. It's not corporeal. It's something older. You sound like Yamamoto now," he said, right before she lost her mind. "Listen to me. The viewport is failing. We don't have much time." I moved closer, stopping when he raised the torch higher. "I need your help to modify the reactor settings." "Why?" "So you can shut down our last defenses." His eyes were wild, darting between me and the shadows around us. "I've seen what happens when the lights go out." "Not shut down. Overload." I raised my hands to show I wasn't a threat. "A burst of energy so intense it will overwhelm the phage, like a flashbang." Sully laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You want to overload our nuclear reactor while we're 7,000 meters underwater? That's suicide." "It's our only chance." I took a risk and turned off my wrist light completely, plunging us into the dim red glow of the emergency lighting. "Look at me, Sully. If I were compromised, would I be trying to create more light?" He stared at me in the crimson darkness, uncertainty plain on his face. The ship groaned again, and this time there was no mistaking it for normal settling. Something was forcing its way in. "We don't have time to argue," I said. "The phage is breaching the hull. It'll be here soon." A loud crack echoed through the ship, followed by the distant hiss of water. The emergency bulkhead alarms began to wail. "That's the viewport," I said, my heart racing. "It's in." Sully's expression shifted, fear giving way to something resembling clarity. He lowered the torch. "What do you need me to do?" I moved to the reactor controls, bringing up the manual override panel. "We need to bypass the safety protocols and create a burst of energy, light, heat, radiation, everything we've got. One massive pulse." His hands joined mine on the controls, decades of experience guiding his movements. "The coolant systems will fight us. We'll need to manually override them." "Can we do it remotely?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He shook his head. "Someone has to stay here to trigger the final sequence and hold the override. The automated systems will try to prevent a meltdown." Our eyes met in the dim light, and I saw the weight of understanding settle on his features. "One of us has to stay," he said quietly. I nodded. Inside the blast radius. The lights flickered as something moved through the ship, following the energy trail to its source. Frost formed on the metal surfaces around us. Sully's expression hardened with resolve. "I'll do it. You need to prep the escape pod." "Sully, Don't argue, Kay." His voice was firm, but there was no anger in it now. "I've been sailing these waters for 30 years. This is my ship." "We could set a timer," I suggested, even as I calculated the impossibility. "Give you enough time to reach the pod." "The phage would follow," he said simply. "Someone needs to make sure the override holds until detonation." "You know I'm right." I did know. The phage had proven too adaptive, too intelligent to be fooled by an unattended timer. It would sense the energy building and find a way to stop it or escape. The hiss of water grew louder. Somewhere in the ship, multiple compartments were flooding. The darkness in the corridor outside the engine room seemed to deepen, as if gathering itself. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you earlier," Sully said, turning back to the controls. His fingers moved with practiced precision, bypassing safety measures and preparing the reactor for overload. "You were right to try to understand it. And you were right to be cautious," I admitted. "If we'd left when you first suggested, we'd have taken it with us," he finished. "Up to the surface. To the rest of the world." I helped him finish the preparations, setting the reactor to build toward a controlled detonation. Not enough to trigger a full meltdown, but enough to create a pulse of energy that would, hopefully, overwhelm the phage. When the final sequence was ready, Sully stepped back from the controls. "You need to go now. Get to the escape pod. It's prepped and ready in Bay 2. I hesitated. "How much time will you need?" "Once you're clear, about 3 minutes to bypass the final failsafes." He glanced at the darkening corridor. "The phage will sense what we're doing. It'll try to stop us." The reality of what was happening, what Sully was volunteering to do, hit me fully. There has to be another way. There isn't. He put a hand on my shoulder. "This is how it has to be. Now go. That's an order." I took one last look at him. This gruff captain who had always put his crew first, even when we disagreed, even when we thought he was just being superstitious. Now he was making the ultimate sacrifice based on nothing but trust in my plan. "I'll make sure people know what happened here," I promised. A sad smile crossed his weathered face. "Just make sure they know to leave some things in the dark." I turned to leave and paused at the doorway. The corridor felt ominous. Behind me, Sully stood at the reactor controls, straight and determined. A captain at his post until the end. "When you get to the pod," he said, not looking up from the controls, "burn every light you've got. The flash from the reactor will buy you time, but the phage is old, patient. It'll recover." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I understand." With a deep breath, I stepped into the corridor, my wrist light creating a small bubble of safety in the encroaching darkness. Behind me, Sully began the final sequence that would turn our nuclear reactor into the most powerful flashbang ever created, and almost certainly end his life. I sprinted through the dim corridor, clutching the emergency kit against my chest. My shoulders bumped against the narrow walls as I made my way toward the escape pod bay. Behind me, the Magellan's hull groaned under increasing stress. Those weren't ordinary pressure sounds. I'd spent enough time in submersibles to know the difference. "Sully, are you ready?" I called into my comm unit, trying to keep my voice steady. "Almost there, Kay." His voice came through with a slight crackle. "The reactor safety protocols are giving me trouble. How much time do we have?" I reached the escape pod bay and slapped my palm against the access panel. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. "Not enough," I said, stepping inside and tossing the emergency kit onto the single seat. "The temperature's dropping fast. I can see ice forming along the corridor seams." The escape pod was a reinforced bubble with basic navigation systems, built to reach the surface quickly. I started the pre-launch sequence, my fingers moving across the controls with practiced precision. "Kay, listen to me." Sully's voice had changed, taking on a resolved tone that made me pause. "We both know someone needs to stay behind to make sure this works." I knew what he was saying, but I didn't want to hear it. "We're sticking to the plan. Set the sequence. and get to the secondary pod. There's no time for that. The safety override requires manual confirmation every 30 seconds. He took a deep breath that carried through the comm. Besides, I need to make this right. My hands hovered over the control panel. Make what right? I doubted you. Thought you were compromised when you were trying to save us. The sound of metal tools clanking came through the comm. If I'd listened sooner, maybe Thorne would still be here. I wanted to argue, but a violent shudder ran through the ship, nearly knocking me off my feet. The overhead lights in the pod bay flickered and went out, leaving only the glow from the escape pod's interior lighting. Sully, we don't have time for this. Just set the sequence and... A crash echoed through the ship, followed by the unmistakable sound of rushing water. Hull breach in Section 4, Sully reported, his voice calm despite the circumstance. Kay, you need to launch now. I secured the hatch of the escape pod and strapped myself into the seat, fighting against the growing sense of dread. Through the small viewport, I could see darkness seeping into the bay. Not water, but something else. Something that seemed to crawl against the laws of physics. Sully, the phage is in the pod bay, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I see it on the monitors, he replied. The whole ship is being invaded. Launch now, Kay. My finger hovered over the launch button. What about you? I'm where I need to be. There was a certainty in his voice I'd never heard before. I've rerouted all remaining power to the reactor. When I trigger the overload, it'll create an energy surge unlike anything this depth has ever seen. Another violent shudder ran through the ship. Through the viewport, I watched as tendrils of pure darkness slithered across the bay, probing, searching. One touched the exterior of my pod, leaving a trail of frost in its wake. Kay, launch! Sully shouted. I slammed my hand on the button. The pod shuddered as the docking clamps released, and then I was free of the Magellan, thrusters pushing me upward and away from the doomed vessel. Through the viewport, I could see the Magellan below me, now barely visible as darkness wrapped around it like a shroud. The ship's exterior lights were completely gone, swallowed by the phage. I'm clear, I reported, watching the depth gauge as the pod rose. Sully, can you hear me? Static filled the comm. Then his voice broke through, fragmented and weak. Can see it, coming through the reactor room door, frost everywhere. Sully. It's okay, Kay, he said, his voice suddenly clear. I know what to do now. Remember what Dr. Yamamoto said? It feeds on our fear. I'm not afraid anymore. The comm went silent for several seconds. Then Sully's voice returned, now calm and resigned. You were right all along. Some things can't be understood, only fought. A pause. It's here with me now, Kay. I can feel it. Cold. So cold. I tried to respond, but the comm filled with static again. Below me, the Magellan was now completely dark, a black void against the ocean floor. Then, without warning, a pinpoint of light appeared at the center of the darkness, small at first, then expanding outward in a silent explosion of pure energy. The light grew brighter, blinding. The escape pod's sensors went haywire, alarms blaring as radiation levels spiked. Then came a sensation I couldn't explain, a deep, raw pain and rage that threatened to tear my mind apart. The viewport of the escape pod cracked, a web of fractures spreading across its surface. I pressed my hands against my ears, though it did nothing to block the mental assault. Blood trickled from my nose as the pressure inside my head built to unbearable levels. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. I looked down through the cracked viewport. Where the Magellan had been, there was now only a sphere of fading light, like a dying star. Within it, I could make out the twisted metal of what had once been our vessel, now melting in the intense heat of the reactor overload. The phage had recoiled from the light, its dark mass contracting and writhing at the edges of the energy sphere. It couldn't follow me. Not now. Not while stunned and overwhelmed by Sully's final act. The escape pod continued its ascent, leaving behind the burning wreckage that consumed both Sully and the ancient predator. I watched until the light faded completely, until there was nothing left but the eternal darkness of the deep ocean. My pod shot upward, taking me toward the surface and whatever lay ahead. But part of me stayed below, in that moment when light broke through, when Sully had sacrificed everything to give me a chance to share what we had discovered, and what had found us. I sat in the leather chair that felt too soft, too comfortable for the conversation taking place. Across from me, 3 executives in matching gray suits watched me with expressions ranging from bland concern to open skepticism. The office was painfully bright, with overhead fluorescents that didn't leave a single shadow anywhere. That was fine by me. "Ms. Rostova, we understand you've been through a traumatic event," said the woman in the center, Ms. Chen, tapping her manicured nails on my written report. "But you must see how this sounds to us." I looked at the 3 of them, Ms. Chen with her perfect posture, Mr. Adeyemi with his folded hands, and Dr. Ruiz with his clinical stare. Behind them, a wall of windows showed the company headquarters sprawling 40 stories above the city. Clear blue sky, sun pouring in. I'd asked for this meeting at noon. No chance of darkness creeping in. "Everything in my report happened," I said. "Thorne's death, Sully's sacrifice, the entity we encountered, the phage. It consumes light and energy. It got into the Helios through the systems, and it got into our ship the same way." Mr. Adeyemi sighed. "Kay, we recovered the wreckage. Our analysis shows a clear reactor malfunction. The pressure at that depth can cause hallucinations, and combined with the loss of your colleagues..." He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "We found no evidence of any entity," Dr. Ruiz added, adjusting his glasses. "The black box data you recovered was corrupted beyond salvage. There's nothing to support your claim of a non-corporeal predator." Of course there wasn't. They had made sure of that. "I know what I saw," I insisted, my voice steady. "The Helios crew didn't die from a malfunction. The logs showed corrupted data that your mind filled with meaning during a high-stress situation." Ms. Chen cut in. She pushed a folder toward me. "We're prepared to be very generous, Kay. A full severance package, comprehensive medical coverage including psychiatric care, and relocation assistance." I opened the folder. The numbers made me blink. Enough money to never work again if I was careful. "All we require is your signature on the standard non-disclosure agreement," Mr. Adeyemi said. "For legal purposes..." I flipped to the NDA. 20 pages of legalese that boiled down to one thing: shut up or else. "You know I'm telling the truth," I said quietly, looking up at their faces. Not one of them flinched or looked away. They'd had this conversation before, I realized, with other survivors, other expeditions. "We know you believe what you're saying," Dr. Ruiz replied. "But the science simply doesn't support it. There's no such thing as a creature that feeds on light or fear." I could have told them about the patterns on the Helios hull, about Thorne's last scream, about the cold that wasn't just temperature but something deeper, about the way Sully spoke at the end, when he said he could feel the phage. But I saw the pointlessness written in their practiced expressions. They didn't want the truth. They wanted closure, containment, and continued operations. I picked up the pen. "Smart choice," Ms. Chen said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You've been through enough." As I signed my name, I wondered how many other signatures were on file. How many other expeditions had encountered the phage, only to have their experiences buried under NDAs and dismissals. "Will you be sending anyone else down there?" I asked as I closed the folder. The three executives exchanged quick glances. "That area has been marked for equipment testing only," Mr. Adeyemi said carefully. "No manned expeditions for the foreseeable future." At least there was that. I stood up, taking my copy of the agreement. "Thank you for your time. Take care of yourself, Kay," Ms. Chen said, almost sounding sincere. "The company therapists are excellent. They can help you process what happened." I nodded and walked out, knowing I'd never speak to any company therapist. I didn't need someone telling me what I saw wasn't real. I knew what was real. My new apartment was on the 22nd floor of a high-rise downtown. I'd chosen it for the modern electrical system, the multiple circuit breakers, and the fact that the building had backup generators. The place came furnished, but I'd added my own touches. Lamps in every corner, light strips along the baseboards, and a backup battery system that could keep everything powered for 72 hours if needed. I walked through my living room, checking each light as I did every morning. Table lamp, floor lamp, ceiling fixture, track lighting, all working, all bright. I moved to the kitchen and did the same, then the bathroom, then the bedroom. My neighbors probably thought I was crazy, with the glow visible from under my door at all hours. My electricity bill was outrageous. I didn't care. The blackout curtains stayed closed over every window. I'd installed them myself, using extra fabric to ensure no gaps at the edges. The darkness stayed outside where it belonged. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, opening my laptop to check the news. No unusual deep-sea incidents reported. No unexplained power outages. Nothing that might indicate the phage had found another food source. It had been 3 months since the Magellan. 3 months of sleeping with the lights on. 3 months of taking stairs instead of elevators, carrying 4 flashlights wherever I went, and flinching whenever a light flickered. I got up and walked to my front door, crouching down to look at the thin sliver of shadow visible underneath it. That was the one darkness I couldn't eliminate completely. Building regulations prevented me from sealing it off, so I watched it instead. Several times a day, every day. The darkness was still, ordinary, but I knew better now. I picked up one of my flashlights and pointed it at the gap, just to see the light push back the shadow, just to make sure it behaved like normal darkness should. What Dr. Yamamoto had written in her logs replayed in my head. The phage evolved in the deepest parts of the ocean, where patience is a survival trait. It can wait centuries between feedings. I put the flashlight down and stood up. I had survived. I had escaped. But some part of me would always be back in that submersible, watching the darkness press against the viewport, feeling it hunger for the light inside me. I went back to the kitchen and refilled my coffee. I had a therapy appointment at 10, not with a company doctor, but someone independent who didn't dismiss my delusions, but helped me function despite them. The lights hummed softly throughout my apartment, keeping the darkness at bay. I would live my life this way now, vigilant, cautious, never fully relaxed. A woman changed by what she'd seen in the depths. A woman who understood that some predators were patient, who could wait centuries between feedings. I glanced once more at the thin line of shadow under my door before turning away. I would be ready if it ever came for me again.